Okay, so we'll jump right in. I have been excited all day. My kids and my dogs know that they cannot come anywhere near my office door. They had to order pizza. They are like fending for themselves because I keep saying, the fact that if 20 years ago Kristen could see Kristen right now being able to share stories and strategies of success, it is, I don't know if you've seen my TED talk, but I've been very open about the fact that I did not start this with a big smile on my face 20 years ago. I was quite the different outlook and different person. And honestly, it is simply because of people like I get to be now that put their arm around me and said, some of this is going to suck, but most of it is going to be amazing. And that's pretty much my life with my blind kids and my sighted daughter, because having a daughter is wonderful. And then there are days when I'm like, oh my God. So, and the people that told me that were exactly right. So now my mission is to do everything I can to make sure that nobody is on their journey in raising blind kids the way that I started, because there is so much available now and so much out there for these kiddos to absolutely thrive, no matter what part of the country you happen to be living in, what services you do or don't get. I have found that in the 6 different things that I'm going to talk about over these 6 weeks, and then you guys are stuck with me for life. Sorry, because you're my founding group. All of these different things I see as long as these are in place, no matter your situation of where you live and whatnot, it all still can end up in a thriving journey, as opposed to sitting on the sidelines, which is where I thought my boys were going to be. So let's real quick, since this is, I should say that this group was designed to be small for a reason. And I really am calling this the founders group because it's the first time that, I mean, I searched, is there some kind of mastermind group like this? I was just going to jump in instead of starting one, and there wasn't. So I want to be able to design this in a way that it meets all of your needs, that then will help it grow to meet other people's needs. And some of it I may be very much in touch with stuff that you're going through, and some of it may have been so long ago that some of the things have changed. So let's kind of go through together. But if you guys could each let us know what age your child is, if you have more than one that's visually impaired, if you have sighted kids also, and what the blindness condition is. And I'll just start, I don't know where we're all at on each other's screen. So on the top of my screen is Tiffany. So let's start there.
So my daughter, her name's Brielle, and she was my first. She's 5 years old now. She's blind from Leber's. She has LCA CRX, which is a dominant mutation. So we also have a 2-year-old boy who's sighted. So it was definitely, I'm so thankful for this group, because I feel like sometimes I have so many questions of just random questions, like, is this normal? And sometimes I wonder, because Brielle's 5 and she's my first, and I wonder sometimes, is this blindness related, or is this just kid related? So I'm so excited to meet you guys, and be able to share stories and make connections.
Awesome. Okay, Rosa, you're under Tiffany here, so go for it.
Hi. And thank you for opening up this platform. This is wonderful. Actually, I have a 14-year-old stepson that I adopted through my last relationship, and I've been raising him for the past 8 years. He's born with detached retinas. He's got, and I can never say this right, I can never say it. It's a Rema, whatever. Anyways, he was born with detached retinas. Okay. And he is a thriving teenager. He's a go-getter. He's an overachiever. He's amazing. And honestly, it's been a long, interesting journey with him that I feel that we both learned from this. And I'm still very much actively involved in his life because I'm his mother figure. And he, I basically just want, because now he's in this stage of his life right now that he is going into high school, and I'm noticing that his frustrations are increasing because he's finding challenges in certain areas that he's like frustrated with the idea that he has to use a cane, and frustrated with the idea that he feels that he's challenged and goes through more obstacles than a visually, able, teenager, I guess. And I try to always explain to him, and I do read a lot, and I try to do a lot of research and to explain to him that it's not just because he's blind that these things happen, because unfortunate things happen to people in general, which is computer issues, whatever. I mean, little things like that. Anyway, but he's finding more and more challenge. His frustration level is elevating, and I just want truly to be able to provide him, all of the resources and avenues possible for him to thrive, because he's eager to. So this
Awesome.
has become like a blessing to run into you, and I can't even thank you enough for opening up this platform for us.
Oh, terrific. Terrific. Okay, great. All right, Kelly, you're up.
Hi, I have a 19-year-old daughter. She's not the visually impaired one. And then I have a 10-year-old son. He did not become visually impaired until he was 7. He mysteriously came down with optic neuritis. We don't really know exactly when it happened. We noticed it when first grade started and he couldn't see the board or anything that the teacher was doing with him. And by the time we went through specialists and treatments and things, his optic nerves are irreversibly damaged and he's legally blind. He's lost his central vision. So we spent that first year bouncing around to specialists with the hope that there was still something they could do to retrieve vision. And then spent the second year trying to figure out what school looked like in a school that didn't know how to accommodate visually impaired children. And now we have had to relocate for my husband's job. So this past school year was spent reestablishing accommodations and things in a new school district. And we're just trying to find, he does have a VI teacher, and that teacher in that school that comes into our school, of course, really pushes Braille, which we do agree that he needs in case he would lose more vision, or just as a tool because he cannot read text. His vision is too bad. And then his vision specialist is pushing the technology side. And one of the struggles we're having right now is trying to find the balance and how can we help him use the technology, because he didn't start Braille until this year. So he's barely at a kindergarten level in Braille, and he's going into the 4th grade next year. So I'm just kind of dreading the start of school, trying to balance that out and trying to voice my concerns and my requests at his IEP meetings. So I was just super excited to find this group and this opportunity.
Oh, fantastic. So as I'm listening to each of you, I set this up for the 6 weeks, 1 hour week and all of that. And then the 6 months of monthly guests coming on to talk about different issues. But what I also want to do, and I was talking to my boys about this today, and it's just so funny the way that this journey of mine is so serendipitous. I get these ideas in my head, and then I'm listening to you guys, and you're solidifying what my boys and I talked about. I think it would be very helpful, and you guys, you can always message me privately, or we can talk on here, or you can talk openly on the Facebook group. But I think it sounds like it would be very beneficial for them to either jump into some of these meetings or do a separate one, or have conversations with your kids on a separate, because I don't know if you've seen my boys on some of the stuff on the videos and all, but they are as different can be. And the fact that they have the exact same mutation issue causing, even their specialists at Mass Eye and Ear said, oh my God, they're different all the way to the retinas, but they have the same condition. They are just like Michael's the overachiever. Mitchell tries to get away with everything. Mitchell struggled with his cane. He's still, I always joke that his friends are going to think that the handicap, the ADA sign, quote, for blindness is a cane dragging behind you, because we're still, he's going to be a senior in high school because he still has some teeny tiny vision that he can use. So they're just so very different, and they're equally entertaining, and kids tend to really enjoy listening to them. So we'll have to schedule something where we can have your kids on to hear
That would be
stuff
cool.
Michael and Mitchell struggled with, because they did not, neither of them did I think would be where they are right now based on where we started, because Michael started very late with Braille, because someone in Chicago when we lived there said I was so lucky that he wouldn't need it. He'd had so much usable vision. When I think about that now, it was the biggest mistake I ever made was to cheer that. I cheered about that, you know, because compared to all the kids she saw, he did have a lot of vision. But for him to succeed at the level that we knew he would, that was really bad advice. So anyway, that was a really long story to say I think it might be helpful to have them come in. I mean, I'll share all their stories with you guys, but then to see them and for your kids to hear the struggles that they had, it might be helpful. And then I also already have on the agenda some other folks during those once a month things. Like, have you followed Kim Owens, if you've heard of her with navigating blindness? Her son Kai is a skimboarder who lost his vision to retinitis pigmentosa just a few years ago. And he's 17 now. And he's a phenomenal resource, both of them, for kids and parents about losing vision and struggling with confidence and things like that. So they're going to come on. They'll be in the Facebook group too to answer questions and give advice and stuff like that too. So all kinds of things like that are in the works. But I think instead of waiting for my boys later, we'll just infuse them somehow, either in a bonus night or we'll just bring them into one of these. But we'll do it in advance. And then if you want to have your kids on. And I'm also going to put in the Facebook group, which will start running tomorrow. I'm going to get everybody's email to make sure that I did it right to invite folks. There's an interview that they just did on the show that I host with a friend about resilience, and my boys were just on as the guests, and it's actually a very good one for you to watch with your kids so they can see the different. I mean, Mitchell's really funny and it pisses Michael off, and and it's like they have this thing but it might be really cool just for them to start to see that there's other kids that feel the way they feel sometimes and that have struggled with the stuff that they struggle and have wild success that like I said, I didn't even realize they would have. So let's just bring them in sooner than later, but I'll share that video. And then I think I talked about all of this, and the Facebook group, that's where I'll be posting stuff that, based on the stuff that we talk about each Monday. And then through the rest of the week, I'll put supporting stuff out there, like TED Talks that I'll refer to tonight and some other stuff. But that's really, there's only going to be, for now, us and there's a few people that are the most phenomenal mentors that will come in and ask questions. And it's absolutely, it's not one of those that people can find and see who's in it. It's going to be 100% private so that we can ask all the questions and all that. And then, on top of that, you can always message me and we can hop on the phone and work through stuff if you don't want to do it, quote, publicly. Not that it'll be all that public. All right. And I had on here to see what a goal is that you're hoping with this program, but I think we kind of already talked about that, unless there's an additional thing that you were struggling with or really hoping to get out of. And at the end of this, I should say, at the end of our hour, I do want to hear what kinds of questions you have that we can start working on now to get answers and make sure they're built into all the modules. So if you have like questions of when to start Braille or how often, and just to jump out of sequence for a second, in terms of starting Braille, what grade is your son going into at 10? Fourth or third?
He's going into fourth grade.
Into fourth, okay. One of the things that we did do, and I'm going to address it in the IAP module, is my guys actually went to school an hour early before school opened. When the teacher's contract started at like 7:30 and our school didn't open until 8:35, I looked at the TVI's schedules, their contract time, because they're an intermediate unit, was much more flexible than the school teacher's schedule. So my guys, Mitchell hated this, but they went in an hour early Monday through Friday and just did Braille and assistive technology.
Wow.
So they didn't have to get pulled out. And I will tell you, I will shout it from the rooftops, and school districts despise me at these big conferences because I'm like, you should have an hour a day. That's what my boys did, an hour every day. So they never missed a class because I was concerned about social. I wanted them in there. And especially for our kids that don't have additional challenges going on. Some of the kids, like if they're on the spectrum and all these other things, pulling out is way is better for them. So it didn't matter for them to miss class time, but for my guys, it worked like a charm. And they did give up a lunch once a week to do mobility lessons. And we'll talk about that in mobility as well as the IEP time, because there was just no other time and I didn't want to pull them out, and they wouldn't let me pull them out of library. To this day, you'll see me with a campaign someday about why do we have so much library time? But anyway, and of course now I'm an author and I want to get into library time at the schools, right? I'm like, well, maybe I shouldn't have that campaign. But it's something to consider, and we'll deep dive into how we got that approved. It was an interesting ride, but at the point we were at, which I'll get into a little bit, it was kind of a mess of we were going to be the only voucher program in our district if they didn't do something to fix what was happening. And they were pretty much going to do anything I said, so I didn't go to court. And it was a shame we had to get there, but sometimes you have to get there. So at any rate, so keep that in mind. But I want to, let me see if I can do this with sharing my screen. Have you guys seen my TED Talk?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Then I don't have to go through the whole thing. I do have the PowerPoint ready. Are you guys seeing my screen?
No.
No.
All right, let's see. Share the screen. You seeing it yet?
Mm-mm.
Mm-mm.
No.
Let me see if I click on this. Now, do you see a slideshow?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, fabulous. Okay, let me go back to the beginning. I just want to have you have some visuals in your mind as I'm talking about all this. So, and if it's all right with you, I'm just going to leave it on this so I don't screw it up. This is a picture that just makes me laugh because it was a couple of years ago and my daughter's now the tallest in the house and I'm the smallest. So I continue to use this just because it drives her crazy. She is so tall. Next week I'll put in the Facebook group the pictures we just took at the beach. She's so tall and I'm so short. They're all taller than me. But at any rate, so from my TED Talk, my whole story of my moment of surrender, right? When I was like crushed over, look at that little face. That was like just about a year, I think. But I was so incredibly crushed. And what I've come to find out all these years later is I was crushed by blindness because my dreams for Michael were crushed. And you know that from the TED Talk. So I won't deep dive into that. But what I'm also realizing is I'm always now looking for, if you know my book, there's every chapter ends with the bright side. And I'm always looking for the bright side in this journey. And what I'm realizing is because I have a sighted child also, blindness crushing my dreams for Michael and Mitchell actually did them the biggest favor, because then I was like, well, I don't know what the heck you're going to do. So, you guys figure it out and I'll just get you everything you need. And I found that with my sighted daughter, her and I were butting heads years ago so much because she wanted to walk away from soccer and we invested our whole lives in soccer. And I was a lifelong soccer player and I was hanging on to my dream for her. And I finally had to let it go, which I was like, oh my God, that's what happened with the boys. I didn't have dreams for them. I let them have their own dreams. So if there's, I'm always going to point out the bright sides of this. And the one biggest one is that our dreams for them get to be extinguished and we get to just know them as people. And as a little sidebar, somebody told me a long time ago, someday you're going to look at your child and see them first, blindness second. And I thought they were nuts. I thought they were absolutely nuts because I was consumed by everything about blindness and how to do everything. And it was different for both of my boys. And I cannot pinpoint the year that it happened anymore because it was a while ago. But I do remember with both of them when it evolved to, oh my God, like I was introducing them without saying anything about their blindness. And I remember I was in a church group not that long ago here, because we lived in Chicago for a while. And I actually introduced myself without saying that I had two blind kids. And it was the first time I had ever done that with a new group of people. So, at this point I was still seeing just blindness, but I eventually did evolve to it really is in the background of our lives. And it's probably hard for you to consider, right now, especially those of you with much younger kids, because you have so much to think about and so much to plan for, and especially with school, but it does eventually all pay off. And someday I'll be able to put my feet up. We shall see. But what I really realized was it isn't about me. It isn't about us. It really is about them. And every single time that I struggle with being crushed again by blindness, I honestly have to think to myself, is it about me or is it about them? Like one time when Michael was in kindergarten, do I have his little, I won't skip to his kindergarten picture, but when he was in kindergarten, which was almost right after Mitchell, that was Mitchell,
Aw.
Michael, he was on the school bus. Now at this point, you know, Michael's 5, I was doing pretty well. I stopped crying all the time and he was doing great and I was excited. And I think he was playing Pee-wee soccer. Like things were really going along well. And don't you know, I know now that the word is triggers. I didn't realize that that's what they were back then. But he got on the kindergarten bus. And you know how at kindergarten, all the moms are at the bus stop and they're all, you know, like waving and, oh my God, and taking pictures. And Michael couldn't see me and see me waving. And I was crushed all over again. And I thought, God, you know, I'm doing all this and I'm happy and he's doing well, but my kid cannot see me waving to him from the bus. And then years later, I thought to myself, Michael's the kind of kid that even if he could see, he didn't care that I was waving. Like he had people to talk to. He's still like that, like, lady, get out of my way. You know, like, I don't care that you're waving. I've got people to talk to. And as a matter of fact, when I dropped him off at 18 years old, now I'm in Philly, he decided to go to Nashville for his freshman year of college. And when we were memorizing the campus for 4 days, by the 4th day, I mean, he knew it pretty well, but now I'm like, now I got to leave him right on the college campus. And I had a near breakdown in the middle of the campus. And I'm like, Michael, I don't think this was the smartest choice. Like, I'm a plane ride away. He knew one kid that was going to be going there, one of his good friends. And I'm like, this campus is big. Like, how are you going to find him? How are you going to find these classes? And it was me taking the stress of, you know, I didn't plan for it to be this way. And how is he going to see everything? And how is he going to manage a big campus and the town of Nashville, right? So eloquently and so lovingly said, I can't freaking believe that you don't trust me. He lost his mind. Michael never yells. He just never has a tantrum. And he had a massive shouting match at me. And his thing was, I've been doing this for 18 years. This is how I do life. Like, yeah, I can't see the campus, but I have worked for 18 years to figure out how to navigate things. Why don't you trust me? Was his question.
Wow.
You know, and that was 18 years into this journey. And that was a moment that I said, okay, you're right. You're right. I do need to trust you. You've been working on this. We've been building this for 18 years. Of course, then he's my first child. I whipped out my phone and I pulled up Facebook. I go, let me just tell you something. All of my mom friends are dropping their kids off at college and crying. They don't think anybody's ready. It was so funny. He's like, well, if anyone's ready, it's me. So anyway, but my whole point is that it really is when you think about it in terms of what is their actual experience. I'm experiencing something completely different as their mom, but what is their experience? Like I said in the TED Talk, Michael was having the time of his life at 3 years old. Blindness wasn't bothering him at all. I was the one that was in the way of that. So I am constantly reframing my mind he's 20 and a half and I'm still reframing. And there's things like, if you haven't seen, is it David Kishner has a TED Talk about, I think it's called Batman or something, because he does the echolocation. And I'm not the biggest proponent of echolocation. However, watch that talk and I'll put it in the group, because he talks about how he navigates by sound bouncing off of things. And my boys do a lot of that by sound. They just do things not completely, some things completely different than we do, but they still access the world. And I'm telling you, 20 and a half years into this, with all the success that they've had, I still have to reframe my mind about, okay, They just access the world differently. And then I move on. I have triggers every now and again, and then I do that and move on. And one more resource is, if you read Thriving Blind, then you might remember the story of Kathy Nimmer, who was the teacher of the year. Teacher of the year in Indiana, but then in the top 4 of teacher of the year in the country, and she's completely blind. And one of my favorite things, besides her being one of my favorite people on the planet, I also interviewed her on my show about resilience, which I'll drop into the group. But her big line is, your blind child will still get to the top of their mountain, but the path is gonna look different than you planned. And I think about that all the time when I assume that the plan was going to go one way and realize that they need a little bit of tweaks here and there, to get to the, and it's the top of their mountain that I always have to remember. It is not the one that I intended for them. Which I could never even have dreamed the stuff that they would dream to be doing and accomplishing. So it's pretty good. So like I said, I'll drop those resources in. But this, if you also know my work and the stuff that I talk about all the time, is this thing that I have to come up with a better visual for, but it is what it is at this point. It's that the perceptions that I'm talking about, which I talked about in that whole TED Talk about our perception of blindness, driving our expectations for our kids, which is absolutely causing their outcomes. And if I always say to like school districts and groups and parents, if you don't like the outcomes that are happening, you got to go all the way back to your perceptions, because that's what's driving everything. I mean, I had, let me go into perceptions. You know that from that TED Talk, you know that this was the scene. This was the scene that I thought my life was on diagnosis day. My little family is set out on an ocean and the sun's going down, and I have absolutely no idea what to do. My life's work has become that I believe, and this is what I love about this group, is that we need to be dropped off in a harbor of those boats representing absolutely every tool and resource that our kids are going to possibly need. And the mountain in the background is the top of their mountain, that those resources that they get all along their journey, and they can keep coming back, and you can keep coming back to this harbor to pick up new resources as the path changes or a challenge comes along, that you and your kids can still get to the top of that mountain. And I actually incidentally took this picture myself. That's in Vancouver. The big Vision Research Conference that has like 12 or 13,000 people was at the Vancouver Convention Center. And I got to debut or do a screening of my TED Talk and talk about that we need to change our perceptions and expectations in the blind community to make the journey so much better. So what does that look like in terms of, let me flip back to our group for a sec. So, I always say that in terms of expectations, they should be extraordinary. And I don't mean that, and you're going to hear that word a lot from me, and I do not mean extraordinary in the term of, like somebody called me on Facebook one time, super blind. You're one of those super blind families where you're going to achieve everybody because you're going to show the blindness is not a big deal. And I was like, no, I'm a tired mom because my kids want to do everything. I am not super blind. We suck at blindness half the time, and they just want to do everything that they want to do. But they forget sometimes they don't have sight. It's not about super blind. My thing is extraordinary in terms of what's outside of what's ordinarily expected. And I have figured out that is the differentiating thing for my boys, that we had to convince everyone along their journey, including myself and our family, that this was going to look different than anyone expected it to, including me. That initially I expected blindness to be isolating and devastating, and no one would ever understand. And it could not be further from that. So as we go through the modules and you hear me talking about things like mega goals in the IEP and mobility lessons and navigating Penn State's campus now, it's because we set the expectation that this is going to be outside of what people would typically expect from a blind kid. Nobody's to this day, even people that have grown up with Michael and this whole town knows Michael, and they go, God, how is he navigating Penn State? And I'm like, how did he navigate everything else that he's been doing? You know, it's just outside of what is expected. Now, that's a nice, easy thing for all of us to agree to and realize that we can go about our life that way. It's the people along the way that get exhausting, that you have to keep changing that expectation of theirs to be as extraordinary as yours is, and reminding them. And one of the things that that drove me crazy in the beginning, and you may have had this a similar experience or might be coming up on it, is Michael, and especially being an LCA kid, where they are the majority of those genes, I believe, in LCA are off the charts smart, which adds another layer of challenge to the whole school, public school thing. But anyway, so Michael sailed through preschool. I mean, I was like, why was I worried? This kid is so smart. Well, he was so smart that they called me in one time and said, he's not blind. They're like, you think your kid is blind, but he's not. And I watched him in the one-way mirror thing. I said, oh my God, this at 3 years old, the kid had everybody fooled, but he had little tactical strategies that he did. And if you watch your kids, they probably have some as well, like these little built-in ways to manage us adults, where he still does it. When he enters a room, he does something that you react to. Like he'll just go, what's up? You know, when he enters the room, he doesn't know if anybody's in there, but he does it like a general thing to the room, that if you're in the room, you go, oh, what's up? And then he knows that you're the one in the room, right? He'll go, so mom, and then he'll say something. Well, he was doing that to his preschool teachers. He was getting them to talk. Then he would know who they were, and he's calling them by name and their voices. Like, he had them all so full, but he had come up with all these little strategies to figure everything out. And, you know, as long as they didn't change the stuff in the room, he memorized everything real quick, but he just did it real nonchalantly, right? So then we get to kindergarten. We moved back to Pennsylvania, handpicked this elite school district. You know, I think on their website, they probably still say they're the #1 school district on the planet, whatever. And we get there, and doesn't he come home from kindergarten the second week of school, and he's like, he crawls on my lap and cries and says, school is so hard. And I'm like, school is so hard? No, it isn't. You love school. He had been playing school since he was born. So the long story short, we get over there, and it turns out that we called an IEP meeting to review or they had just started on the goals or something. It was something that we were out of sync of the start of the school year. And the issue was, they weren't giving Michael all of the tools and resources and staff and whatever that he needed, because their expectation was that he was going to achieve at 70% of the sighted kids. That was actually built into their IEP goals. If you've ever heard my story about the cubbies, the word cubby still makes me like, it's a trigger for, because the one goal was that Michael was going to find his cubby 70% of the time. And that was when it was revealed that they believed that 70% was amazing for him. And he was then eventually in the gifted program, he was so smart. So my thing to them was, if he's only finding the cubby 70% of the time and he has no additional challenges, then our strategies for working with him are off. He should be finding the cubby 100% of the time. So that was a whole kindergarten for me was the most exhausting year, because it was a year of trying to convince the school that a blind child can achieve 100% of what he's taught, just like the sighted kids, if he's given the right tools and resources. So it isn't always just our own expectations and perceptions that we have to keep in check. We have to keep in check with all of these people all along the way, which is where the exhaustion hits. And then eventually the kids, like my Michael, kind of take over, and kids, it's just so much easier for kids to figure stuff out. It's us adults that get in the way with our ways that we think things should go. But I actually had said to that IEP team, I was like, 70% is the top. Well, I was like, I wonder where the 70% unemployment rate in the blind community comes from. Like, coincidence, you know? So expectations, I am constantly reminding people when they say, well, don't know that a blind person can. And I'm like, well, we aren't normal. We've never been a normal family. We are not normal. And that's just the way that it goes. So it does get a little exhausting, but we will address those kinds of things. Like, I put out there a while ago, the number one question to ask at every IEP meeting, every single time I say, what are the sighted kids doing? As soon as I look at a goal that looks a little like, what is expected of the sighted kids? And usually my kids end up going 2 steps ahead of what they're doing. Let me go back to my screen share and go to the next piece. Okay, so the biggest thing is that I always remind myself in this entire journey, including dealing with people at colleges and people that come along our path, is my intention. And if you follow Simon Sinek, his big thing is know your why. And I always have to remind myself, like I've said probably 5 times already, that this is about Michael and Mitchell's journeys and not about mine. I mean, even like when I was so mad when Michael was involved with this band and then they wanted to replace him, and I'm like, every time I go to freak out for my kids, I'm like, wait a minute, is this like about me or is it about them? But everything, as long as it is about what is best for them, what is getting them to the top of their mountain, to know your why and to go at stuff with the full intention of making that happen for them. And it's a tricky one. IEP meetings used to stress me out horrifically. And then, eventually when I started switching gears and getting perceptions, expectations, and my intentions all in line, it worked out a heck of a lot better. So perceptions, I kind of skipped ahead to expectation and defining extraordinary. That was Michael in that kindergarten, first day of kindergarten, when I was waving and he couldn't see me. And then they expected him to only find his cubby 70% of the time. And then this is my favorite. And then he out-achieved like 95%. I think he was in the top 5% of 600 kids in his high school. And he was in every possible club. I mean, I don't even remember what all those things are around his neck. He was voted to student council and National Honor Society and all these crazy things. But it was because it was a fight a lot of times for the tools and resources, but things like that extra hour every day to learn Braille, because he was so far behind in Braille. I did learn the second time around. Mitchell started Braille like when he was born. I labeled my house in Braille. I did learn the second time around, but Michael did, having all the tools and resources, perceptions and expectations all in line, he achieved what he set out to achieve. My Mitchell graduation next year is going to have a whole different picture. He'll have all different accolades around his neck. And because he's completely different from Michael, but the top of Michael's mountain was what he wanted it to be. Actually, I'll jump right into when your perceptions and expectations are aligned, the outcomes are, Michael achieved all that. But interestingly enough, when you saw my TED Talk, that for some reason, I don't know why, one of my biggest dreams for my boys were to be baseball champions and valedictorian, right, with Michael. And lo and behold, he didn't even know that was a dream I had for him that I let go of, but he did become the valedictorian because he had his own voice and his own drive, his own confidence. And I think it's kind of cool too in his speech that he gave. Oh wait, here's a funny thing. Look at the picture. There's people behind him on the left.
That's the best part. I was just gonna say the look on their faces of just like they're in awe with him.
So what's funny that you notice that? That's the school board on the left and the administration on the right. And it's all the folks that only expected him to achieve at 70% and that we had to fight for funding for a lot of their equipment.
Wow.
I did learn, and this is one little tip, I did learn to get like, what do you call it? Like, it's not charisma. I'll think of the word, but I started learning to play the game, I became the fun PTO mom. So the school loves me because I kept them in IEP meetings for 5 hours, right? But I raised a heck of a lot of money for them. And with the school board, I would send my boys to school board meetings just to say thank you for different things that they funded, or let them know what we were doing in the community with Braille. I'm like, I just became like, I learned marketing really well. But we did live in a lot of gratitude, even though a lot of it was a fight. We were always grateful for everything they did. And then there they are. They were so stinking proud of him. But in his speech, he talked about building a team to help you do the things that you can't do because nobody can do it all, which I had been preaching my whole life, right? So I'm sitting there and I was like, oh, that's really nice that he picked that up, you know. And then he went a step further and he said that, you know, life's not a one-way street, that you have to look for teams that you need to be on, which I thought was pretty cool. That now, as this program has evolved, it's exactly how my life has been. I had people helping me on my journey, and now I get to look up and see who I can help on there. So Michael's a little wise beyond his years. And then this is one of my favorites. They're totally different, right? This was Mitchell's big dream. Last year, he was identified as one of the top blind athletes in the country. And we got to go out to USA in Colorado Springs for a week, where he trained with top coaches, the top athletes. And that was basically his valedictorian moment, right? He was at the top of his mountain for sports. And of course, you know, he's got his Phillies gear on. I had thought that they would be, you know, the pitcher for the Phillies, and here he is exceeding that, right? Going up to Team USA. So
Wow.
that was, and we're going to talk about that in the extracurricular module, about all the different, the sports, the clubs, all the different opportunities that they've been able to have, and the things that I had to do to line it up so that they would be able to get in there and achieve. And then this is our signature favorite, that they both were on Little League Championship baseball.
That's awesome.
In our town. Actually, I wrote a movie script for Michael's, his first championship season. And I'm hoping it's a message to get out in the world, because it was just incredible. Wait, so let me just make sure I'm not skipping anything. Oh, I wanted to say back to before outcomes. But one of the things when I was talking about, you know, it's their mountain, it's about them, it's not about us, and about how kids figure stuff out. One of the things that drove me, that I knew, and I'm sure that you realize too, is that our kids can't drive, right? It was one of those things that just kind of, it just kind of drove me crazy for a while. And Michael was impacted at his 16th birthday. It was the first time he ever had an issue with blindness. And there's a whole big thing I'll talk about another module about how I handled that. And it ended up to be absolutely tremendous. But one of the things that he figured out was, you know, Michael was determined to not be on the bus as a junior, because that's like, I guess the most uncool thing in his mind was to have to take the school bus as a junior. And well, he couldn't drive, and I wasn't driving him. I had 2 other kids at home, and I travel for speaking and stuff. So I was like, well, you have to take the bus. Do you know what he did? I love this kid so much. So he figured out to go, wait, I got to get off the screen here because I'm looking at that picture. So he goes to the school, and here he did all this behind the scenes work about the rule of getting an honors lot permit. So the honors, our school campus is ginormous, but if you meet a certain criteria with a high GPA, you get this real close lot next to the door. And it is like, all the smart kids, it is like blood, sweat, and tears to get into the honors lot, right? So Michael goes out and finds out all the rules, and if there's any loopholes in this rule of getting all the criteria to get in the honors lot. He meets all the criteria, the GPA, the this, the that, whatever, volunteer hours, he had everything. And he said it did not say that he had to be cited to get the parking pass. So I'm like, what is it? Why would you need the parking pass for that? So what his plan was, he gets the honors lot pass, which is a whole story that was hilarious. I'll tell you later. Gets the honors lot pass, and then sends a group text to all the kids that missed it, that didn't make the cut. And he said, who wants to drive me to school? I have access to the honors lot.
That is epic. I love that.
And then moms all over town were mad because they figured if their kid didn't make that 3.8 whatever GPA, you have to walk up the hill. And then there's Michael. No, you don't. And then he had such a list of people that wanted into that lot to drive him, that the kids that he worked out a schedule that he had like 3 different drivers to spread out the love, that they got to get into the honor slot. But if you were late twice, you were booted. That was the agreement, because he wanted to be, well, he's early. He's never on time. He's early. So he only went with the people that would get him there early. He got booted. Is that hilarious?
That's genius.
But I have a million stories. Like they figure stuff out when we, take a step back and let them figure it out. But that also came after years of building these tools and strategies and making sure he had everything he needed. And then one more, because I realized I had way more Michael stories than Mitchell. I'm not always super proud of Mitchell's stories, but they're hilarious. But one day, so when Michael was in middle school, one of the things was I had to tell him every morning if his clothes matched. And Mitchell never cared if his clothes matched. Mitchell has always been on Mitchell's schedule and Mitchell whatever. And one year I actually said to Michael, how are you matching your clothes every day? I thought it was a miracle. Here in middle school, he replaced me with his friends in FaceTime. He would FaceTime with his friends that were girls and in the morning and go to his closet and say, which shirt and pants should I wear? But so Mitchell wouldn't do any of that. Mitchell then finally did care when he got to high school. Thank you, God. He started caring about what he looked like. And he came down one day and he goes, and he's standing there in the kitchen. And it was when he started finding out that he's good looking, because people were saying, whoa, he's like a good looking guy. And then that just made his ego go like crazy. So he comes in the kitchen, he goes, Mom, don't I look good today? And he goes, don't I look good in all gray? And I go, I'm going to have to take your word for it, because you're in a blue shirt and khaki pants. And he was like, I am? And I said, yeah. And just when I was about to feel bad for him, that he had no idea what colors he picked, I go, yeah, you are. And he goes, oh, shoot, I thought I put on all gray. And I'm like, no, sorry, buddy, you didn't. And he goes, don't I still look good in what I'm wearing? And I thought, this kid does not have any confidence issues. But my point to that is, the more that the kids have all the tools and resources they need, to your point, Rosa, of your son with this whole, I don't want to use the cane. I don't want to, once they can get over those things and have the stuff and realize the benefits of having those tools and resources, they're confident. For Mitchell, we try to suppress it a little bit. But for the majority of the world, their confidence grows. And then that's when they can start stepping into who they really are meant to be and who they want to be. But yeah, there's a million crazy Mitchell stories out there. He's one of a kind. So along those lines too, let me go back to the screen share for 1 sec. And I realize that I want to have time for us to all, chat about questions and get them logged in for next time. So I was talking about a couple of keys here that we're gonna dive into and have a running through line for the modules and as we move forward together. But one of the biggest things, if you ever read, oh my gosh, the Talent Code, and it's by Daniel, I'll think of his last name in a minute because I always get it wrong. But the Talent Code, he talks about the word ignition, and it goes hand in hand with what Ralph Waldo Emerson says that I have here, is that our chief want is someone who will inspire us to be what we know we could be. And I see that as my role for all of my kids, to ignite them to go after what they believe that they want to be. And I've noticed, with them that it changes over time, and it isn't always like, Michael does have some dreams that he's had for his whole entire life, but I really do believe that that's our role, to ignite them. And one of the ways that I have seen that is well, let me just talk about this for a second. Remember I had this picture in the beginning. This is where my journey started. This is where, especially for your kids that had vision and lost it, I see a lot of them, and I've seen my boys, even though they haven't had vision, there are times in their lives, especially middle school, that was a struggle. Some of the time, not all the time, that they land here where I was in that moment of, I can't do this. This is hard. Why does this have to be me? And really what I've realized is that it's just that there's a lack in a new tool they may need, or it's just, hang in there and have some patience while you're learning this new tool. Or it seems like everybody's going faster than you, but once you catch up, you'll probably end up surpassing them. But I have seen my kids hit this point along their journey. And what my goal is for you guys, that I can be the guide, is that, I'm creating this harbor for you that also creates a harbor for your family and your child, that they can come back to, grab a new resource, go back at getting to the top of that mountain. And then I can promise you this, because I'm experiencing it, especially with Michael, as he's 20 and a half years old now, that eventually they do get to be that boat on the water. You do actually want them to be that solo boat out there to go after what it is that they want to go after, but it's a much brighter scene because they have everything that they need to go tackle that and to go chase that dream. So those are just 3 images that I wanted you to kind of stick in your mind. Like I said, I'll give you this recording, and you'll see those images come through the Facebook stuff often, because I want you to remember, and I have to remind myself this 20 years in, that there are the days that it's dark, seems dark on the water, and they do go through that at different times. But I think if you look back on your own journey in your own life, you've been there also. And it's hanging in there and asking for help and trying to figure out what's lacking, that we need to address. And sometimes it's just pausing and letting that stage, like middle school, pass, getting them the tools and resources so that they can go and literally shine. I just took that picture on my vacation last week, and I was like,
Wow.
oh my gosh, if that doesn't just continue the journey of what I've been using in these pictures of boats and water, it really solidifies what my journey has been, with Michael and Mitchell. And then one final thing to help you keep that shiny boat scene and that harbor. I'm actually working on a new TED Talk, and it's about reframing how we even look at blindness in this country. And if you guys can keep this in your mind, this is what I wish I would have had 20 years ago, that people have told me along the way recently, especially with my book. Kirk Adams is a big one that clued me into this. He's the head of the AFB. And the thing is, I've mentioned that 70% of the blind community is unemployed. My new TED Talk is addressing that by saying, look, goofballs of America, employers, you should be seeking out blind employees, because what you guys are going to realize is, as your kids are on this journey, they are actually developing the top 5 skills that make for the most successful employees in this country. Their resilience and adaptability, which is what our kids are. Michael, on the show that we just interviewed on, talked about, he has to, like, the whole country's talking about how do you become resilient. Michael's like, I'm resilient like 15 times a day. Things never go the way that they're supposed to. And he's constantly being adaptable. So he doesn't see it as resilient. That's just a way of life. So they are constantly, things go wrong all the time in their lives, and they're always adapting and figuring it out, which is another key to don't necessarily have to think of everything in advance. I was always trying to take 2 steps ahead of my kids and not have any roadblocks. And then I'm like, well, that doesn't do them any good. So one of them is resilience and adaptability. The next one is teamwork. It's another huge one that makes for a very successful employee in this country. And our kids, you'll see, when they start learning, like my kids started going into IEP meetings in 3rd grade. They didn't have a huge role, but they had a voice. And then their role, I tacked on more stuff every year. So by senior year, actually the middle of junior year, I don't even have to go. Like Mitchell said to me on the Zoom meetings, you don't have to be in there. Well, with Mitchell, I do have to spy to make sure that he's not telling me, hey, we don't have any work because they don't have computers at school. But I don't actually have to go to them. They run everything. And Michael, I had said in one of the Facebook Lives recently that I am not your go-to woman for college as a blind child. That's my Michael, because he did all of it. He did all of the applications. He does all of the working with the disabilities office. So, I mean, and they've been managing their teaching teams since they were little. So teamwork is a big one. Communication. They had to learn to communicate with every single teacher, email them before school started, and we'll go into all of that in these modules. and problem solving. Oh my gosh. My kids are constantly the ones in their friends groups, in their school projects, all of that figure out I don't know what it is with kids today, but a glitch happens and they're like, oh my God, we can't possibly, and my kids are just used to glitches and figuring it out. And then the fifth one is tech savvy. That is a highly successful person can manage all the different technology and changing technology. And we will do a whole module on assistive technology, because my boys they got the electronic braillers in second grade and have been working with technology ever since. And it literally changed our lives. And we'll talk about that in the IEP stuff. And actually, I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that if you're thinking about or trying to get technology like cell phones, which was the hub of my kids' social life, or other things, there's a foundation called the Zachary Wallace Foundation. If you just Google that, they give $250 grants to blind and visually impaired kids that are looking to get assistive technology. And that's actually how, when I upgrade their cell phones every couple of years, we use that grant to get the new iPhone. So, and it's all different assistive technology. And actually, the last time we looked was probably 3 years ago, because Mitchell keeps nagging me that his phone needs to be updated. But it may even be, I don't know if it's grown since $250 or what, but it's a resource to help with some of the assistive technology. But those kinds of reframes are what I do now, especially with Michael, when I think, oh my gosh, is he going to be able to? And I'm like, oh my God, he has all these skills. Now I just got to convince all the employers to look at this differently as well. But as we go through all this, you'll see that it's not just skills that are getting them through elementary school or middle school or college. It's actually lifelong skills that they're learning. And it doesn't soften the blow for all of the struggle, but hopefully it softens the blow for a lot of it. So with that, I didn't leave a ton of time. I apologize. We only have a minute or two left, but we can go over if you have a few minutes to stay, or you can certainly email me the questions, specifics, or in general, what you're hoping that we touch on, or anything else.
So right now my son, before COVID and everything, he was getting, I believe it was like 25 minutes of Braille 3 times a week. Mm-hmm. That's not nearly enough, right? To get him to where he needs to be.
Yeah, I would say because of starting later, mm-hmm. My Michael didn't start full on everything brailled until 3rd grade. And that was when it was like, oh my God, we have to really up this time. We're never going to catch up. We also do you have ESY in your district? Is your son doing extended school year over the summer?
Oh, yep. And that's been over Zoom. And now just last week, we started, he is meeting with his TBI now in person with a mask. But so, yeah.
So that was also where we caught up huge in the summer. Ours was 6 weeks, which I wished it was all summer, but I could only fight so much. And I learned Braille to be able to supplement, but I didn't tell them that, because then it's like, well, then you can just do it, right? Yeah. But I'll tell you what, once they got really good on the electronic stuff, they blew me out of the water and didn't need me anymore. But I would say, mine is the model, I guess, 5 days a week, an hour a day, to go as high as you can and then negotiate down. And it is something that we're working on between Kirk Adams at the AFB and some others on getting standards out there that these school districts have to meet by law. And I don't know why it's taking forever. It drives me crazy. Yeah, I would definitely fight for a lot more.
I was to the point where I felt like, because he's so far behind and he didn't become visually impaired until he was 7, to go more the technology route. But I think he needs the Braille too. I just don't know how much of each. And the Braille teacher kind of fights the technology part of it, so that hasn't really gotten brought in a lot yet. So, yeah.
I think one thing to realize, and I'm the kind of person, so my ex-husband was bad cop and I was good cop, because I'm To this day, the divorce courts can tell you I'm the nice one. Anyway, that's a whole nother module we can have. But it was against my grain early on to go in and say, I am the manager of this IEP team, which you guys are the managers of the IEP team. It's not the special ed coordinator. It's not the Pope. It's not anybody they say it is. If it isn't you, you're the manager. So it's you going in there and saying, this is what my child needs. And now I did fluff I have an education degree a little bit, saying like puff my feathers and say, I know how education should go. I didn't know.
I'm a teacher as well.
But I did have behind me, I went to, and I can put you in touch with this school. The principal isn't there anymore, but I'm sure that the new principal can help. I went to the day school for the blind in Philly, which is one of the top in the country. And which is what I looked for. What's the top school? So I could call them and say, what is your program? Just so happened it was in my backyard. I went and looked and said, what does your program look like? How often are these kids getting Braille? Because I didn't know. And there was no standards in the country. And then, so my point is I was going in with statistics, an actual program, and said, St. Lucy's Day for the School for the Blind produces these high achieving blind kids. My son is high achieving. Their program looks like this. I want to match it. You know what I mean? So if you go in with statistics and meat behind your words, and you can also now say, I should publish something about, Michael and Mitchell and their Braille time so that people can go into school districts and say, this is the valedictorian of the high school, and he had 5 hours a week. I want to match that, and there is they get to do a lot of illegal stuff like, oh, we only hire one TVI. There's a big group working on that you can't use that as an excuse anymore, but we're not there yet. So it is very individual to your school districts and how much you can practice nagging and, kind of putting on that muscle of being the bad cop. But trust me, I had to get like that, especially when he didn't come to any of the IEP meetings anymore for, I guess, since like 4th grade. So then I had to go in there, be good cop and bad cop. And just I knew where I wanted my son to go, and we weren't going to get there if they were continuing this goofy program that they had. And then it worked. And you can feel free to take the screenshot the picture of Michael in kindergarten and him at graduation, and it was 5 hours a week of Braille that got him there. And the thing is, I will say this too, though, that by the time Michael was in, I guess it was late middle school, probably 8th grade, that I allowed him to do audio listening to his textbooks and all the novels he had to read, because he was in all the accelerated stuff. And for him, Braille was slow because he started late.
That's why I'm starting to panic, is because he's going into 4th grade. I'm a 4th grade teacher. I know the level of text. I know the pace starts to pick up, but yet his Braille teacher is starting to order textbooks in Braille, but he's at about a kindergarten level in Braille. So then my head is trying to connect how she thinks he's going to do these Braille textbooks and still keep up with 4th grade, because he is an advanced student. And I feel like in this new district, he's just a kid that's partially blind. They haven't seen his real academic abilities. And so I'm trying to find the middle point where he can work up to his true potential. So I'm just struggling right now. So
here's what I think you should consider, and this is another one of those like, a perception thing of looking at it. I think if you brainstorm tonight or tomorrow, what are the goals of Braille? The goals of Braille are literacy, so that they know the mechanics of language, how things are spelled, blah, blah, blah. My guys, Braille may phase out, may not. Michael does do a lot more audio now because there's just so much, but it's really the mechanics of language and literacy. So if there's a subject area that is heavy, like, I think it was like social studies, that was so much reading, whereas vocabulary and that other stuff wasn't so much reading. So that was Braille when we were doing the transition kind of thing. That you can go into audio, surely, if the content is so much, but as long as he's still learning all of the how to spell, all of that with the Braille, and it also gives him a break, that he's not like, oh my God, everything Braille, I'm never gonna win here. And then
he loved learning it, but now he's starting to hate it.
Yes.
because it's getting hard. And so that's where I'm struggling too.
Yeah, and that's the last thing. That's absolutely the last thing you want. I'll also I'll look into my like the Braille Institute. I'll call some folks over there and some of my other friends that have some theories on this that they may have and some TBIs about um, other ways that they've gotten around this because it's not a unique problem with
Okay.
kids losing vision and also I mean my Mitchell hated reading. Now
So does Max.
so I'll tell you this, Mitchell hated it. And then by like freshman year, I forget what book series he got into. And I was actually screaming at him from the kitchen one night. He was up in his room to shut the book because we had to go somewhere. And I'm like, and my daughter's like, did you ever think that would come out of your mouth? Like, then he got obsessed with reading. So it took him a long time though to make that switch. And we actually had a TBI that was an artist. And Mitchell loved art, but his vision declined so much in the early years that then he had to like walk away from it. And she figured that out in him and made Braille about art somehow. And then he ended up loving it. Like sometimes it's a person like that comes in, but I would definitely look at what subject areas you can just do audio.
Okay.
But keep the goals in mind of what Braille is for. And then slowly you may see that transition go to Braille. And does he have the electronic Brailler yet, or is it all Perkins?
No, it's the big clunky thing.
That's the other thing. I'm telling you, when my boys got the Apex they don't even make anymore. And Michael is like on, I don't even know what black market websites that kid is on to get pieces for it because he won't give it up. And he found some place that's going to do some cleaning of it for $100. I'm like, who's sitting on a street corner somewhere working on the Apex? You can't get parts for it anymore, but he loves it. And Mitchell was doing Tech Tuesday on my Thriving Blind community on Facebook, showing off all the new electronic braillers. It changed their lives completely. And you know what else it did? Socially, it made them super cool in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade.
Well, here's what's not super cool is they still have him using a big magnifier in the classroom. So he has to have 2 desks, one with the magnifier. And then I'm trying to phase that out because I don't want him suitcasing up this huge magnifying machine and carrying it from class to class. So I did fight most of the year for the iPad Pro, which kind of helps with enlarging and things. But so yeah, I'm just struggling to help him fit in. And
got CCTV, and it was a big clunky mess. And then those were my days of still kind of hanging on to the vision and screwed them up for a couple of years. But yeah, and the other thing is with the electronic brailler, it'll talk too. It'll talk in a computer voice. And my guys they just put in their headphones. And when they have to do some of the audio stuff with it. So it has all the benefits. It's got a huge price tag, but we can talk about that at another time about how we got around some of that.
Okay.
And did stuff with the district to get it approved.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you got it. Anything else?
I have a quick question. So Brielle, she's been blind since birth, and she doesn't have any usable vision. At least none that we know of. So she does a lot of like the self-stimulating behaviors. And, she likes to rock, and she hand claps when she gets excited. And it seems like it's pretty typical with kids that are totally blind to self-stimulate. But I struggle so much with the balance, because like for her, like when she's like, if I'm in the kitchen cooking dinner, like, my sighted son, he's like playing with toys, how they're intended to be played with. Mm-hmm. And then Brielle, she will like be jumping and she'll be like she likes to tap a lot, and she'll tap like a toy back and forth. And I can tell she's playing and she's having like the grand old time, just doing all these things. And, it's such a hurdle for me because it's like I don't want to like hurt her self-image. I feel like all day long it's like, keep your body still, quiet hands, be still, stand up straight, and it's just like I feel like I'm on her all the time because I know that I try to give her time to self-stimulate, mm-hmm. but at the same time, if we have friends over, if we have a play date and she's got friends over, I don't want her being the kid in the corner flapping her hands and jumping.
Right.
I want her to be able to socially play with her peers. And it's just such a big hurdle. And so I just struggle with the balance of, do I let her have these blindnisms, or should I just be on her all the time to try and break them? But the problem is, I feel like if it's not one thing, it's another.
Yeah.
It's like this is constant.
I can tell you that Michael he really didn't have many. I mean, if he did, they were really small and hardly noticeable. And Michael was the kind of kid that I would say to him, Michael, you're doing something that sighted people don't do. And he would go, oh, okay, thanks. Whereas Mitchell had a bunch of them. And I would say, Mitchell, you're doing something that sighted people don't do. And Mitchell would go, I don't care.
Yes. Yes.
He cares now. I mean, eventually they care, but sometimes it's too late that they don't know anything else. So I will tell you this. I just can tell you from stuff that I've seen being out in the community and so many blind kids, it is a social barrier when they do all that stuff. But that being said, I was the same way with my Mitchell. His spirit is absolutely unbelievable. And it's hard I actually started researching when he was little about the spirited child. And trying to use, I was reading those publications to try to figure that part out with the blindness thing of what is okay, not crushing him completely. But at the same time, I didn't want him in school where they were going, he's too weird. And I will say there are some things in high school that he's had to outgrow, because he is the one that's a little spazzy in the class that, shouts something out because he thinks he's cute and he's the blind guy that nobody's going to have an issue, but then kids talk about him. So that was a growing pain in high school, but he's always had these little things. I can tell you that, the eye pressing thing that is huge in the blind community.
Huge. My goodness.
Doctorate papers have been written about trying to figure this out, right? One of the things that was a benefit for my ex-husband, he figured out his love of money matches Mitchell's love of money. They are cut from the same cloth of this whole money thing. And he said to Mitch in first grade, I think it was, he gave him 4 quarters one morning and said, if someone has to tell you to stop pressing your eyes, you have to give him a quarter. And everyone on his IEP team that he encountered, every adult that day was in on it. If they had to say, stop pressing your eyes, Mitchell gave up 1 quarter. And we didn't know that he wasn't having them taken away. My ex-husband was still giving him quarters for weeks, and then found out that he was pocketing them and he only had given up 1. But the point is, we found the one of the major things that was important to Mitchell, that he made the connection that there was some kind of a reward for the thing that he really wanted if he stopped doing this one thing. And it defied all laws of everything that people have said, that is an impossible to stop behavior, because he stopped willingly because of that one thing. I would say give some thought to what are the things that she really enjoys. And you're absolutely right, though, to give her now, we couldn't let Mitchell have the time pressing his eyes because it's so detrimental. But flapping, I mean, he jumps and he squeals and does all that. He doesn't do it anymore, but he used to do these squealing sounds and everything. And I just let him do it, but we had to have conversations. It's exhausting. We had conversations all the time about when it was appropriate, when it wasn't, when it was appropriate, when it wasn't. And actually, to that point, now I think about it, his 4th grade teacher told me, I wanted him in wrestling. I wanted him in activities every night, like Michael was, because I thought he just needed a outlet, for his energy and all that. And his 4th grade teacher said, he works so hard all day long in school to follow the stupid social norms that we all have in the school. She was like, let him do whatever he wants at night. Just let him do it. If he's not going to hurt himself, let him. If he wants to wrestle, great. If he doesn't want to, let him have a break. And that made a world of difference too.
Okay. So do you think that just when she is doing her blindnisms, or if we are having friends come over, prepping her and letting her know, would you just say it like you said, sighted people don't hand flap, or sighted people don't bang on their toys. So would you kind of put it like in that kind of way?
A psychologist might tell me that it's detrimental, but it's the only thing that it was the only thing that made sense to them, that people just don't do the stuff that they're doing, and not necessarily that they don't do it, that it was making people uncomfortable.
Right.
Okay.
A lot of things that I learned too with my son, and I'm sorry for like kind of butting in, but I learned too that because they can't see, they don't realize that people are looking at them a lot of the times.
Yeah.
And
Right.
sometimes you have to kind of remind them, visually, this doesn't really look cool. If you're sitting at a dining room table or in a restaurant, whatever, and everybody's having dinner, visually, if you're over there flapping or, he used to sway a lot. He's getting a little bit better. And the manipulation of the eyes, which he's totally grown out of, and I have to say, a lot. Because I would keep reminding him and I would say, we're sitting at a dining room table and visually that's not, it doesn't look, like cool. You know what I mean? Not that it's cool. I don't remember the word I used to use with him a lot, to where he would understand the concept of that just because he can't see doesn't mean nobody's looking at him. And
Right.
now, do you want to be calling attention all the time to yourself like this? You know what I mean? No, because then now you're so aware and you're so kind of concerned because he became more concerned over his disability more and more as he grew older. Is this something that you want? Do you want to call attention to yourself all the time? And then he realized that he's like, not really. You know what I mean? Like, I don't. So little by little, he's worked hard. And I think just giving them like another avenue, like another vision of how, people view it, or maybe how he can visualize it, just like he used to pick his nose a lot when he was a kid. And I'm like, do you realize that, people are looking at you? Do you want people to really see you picking your nose? And he was like, no. And I was like, okay. So those are things that they may not register, and you have to kind of remind them sometimes, I think, that these are things that are happening. Just because they can't see doesn't mean nobody else can see it.
Yeah, you're right. They don't realize that people are looking at them.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that we did do with Mitch is he always had some kind of, oh my God, when they came out with fidget spinners, I'm like, why didn't I think of that? Always had to have, he's so tactile.
Mm-hmm.
Always had, and he's very, needs the stimulation of things. So he always had something in his hands and trampolines. That kid has jumped through, broken more trampolines because jumping so much. But from the time he was a toddler, we had the one with the handle, and then I progressively I still have one in my backyard, and he's going to be 17 in 2 days. Jumping was huge for him. It gets out that whatever that vestibular thing is, and always having some kind of puzzly thing or something in his hands, watching TV. Even at school, he had little things for his hands.
Yeah, even a stress ball, like one of those little foam stress balls, he would keep it in his pocket a lot of times because we told him how to learn how to like kind of control his emotion with all the, and would give him like a little itty bitty foam little ball or a little something stimulating to every time he felt and he would catch himself, he would, or feel frustrated or whatever it was or excited, he would go in his pocket and he would squeeze and squeeze and squeeze him. And that would stimulate him too. So you have to kind of come up with little ideas here and there. So I think
look at the and I'll try to find it too. The links back to what I used before was Mitchell has sensory processing disorder also. So a lot of the research of stuff that like occupational therapists will put out about handling that applies to a lot of the stuff that Mitch was doing that would look like a blindism, but it was more of him stimulating these neurons that were a little out of whack.
Okay. That's interesting.
Because the thing too is that we can visually entertain ourselves, and these kids cannot. They're basically just sitting there, just it's all audio. So if it's not, they're not stimulated like we are constantly just looking everywhere. Any little thing that happens, and to them, they get bored. Really, honestly.
Yeah.
They get
bored. Definitely.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges with the brilliant kids.
Yeah,
they get bored. That's why my hair turns gray every 3 days. I'm like, oh my gosh. When Mitchell has a day where he goes, man, this is the best day ever, I'm like, you'll see me in the corner like, oh my God, I'm exhausted. All right, good stuff. Anything else?
No, I'm excited. I can't even say enough how excited I am to be able to have this opportunity, because I think that no matter how old, the older they get, I think the more challenges too you find and little quirks here and there, but to be able to have this avenue, and Kristen, I want to tell you that TED Talk is actually a dream of mine that I've forever wanted to be able to get on. I don't know that I'll ever get there, but that's my dream. And to see you doing this and in this realm of the blindness is mind-blowing to me.
Oh, we'll do the TED Talk. Do it. We'll talk about what your message is. And I'm telling you, it was the hardest thing I ever did. And it was at the worst time in my life when my divorce started. But it was the greatest things. I knew that the message had to get out there. And my life was so awful that I had to hire a coach to make sure that it happened. And I had 18 months. And then all of a sudden, the event was 5 months away. And it was the greatest, because it's one of those things, the intention. I just knew that this was going to be the thing to start changing perceptions and use everything that I had been through that was, I thought, the most stressful thing in my life to use it for good. And where it's taken us has been absolutely extraordinary. So we'll talk about that though. If you feel like you have a TED Talk in you, then you need to do the TED
I would
Talk.
love, yeah. Love that.
I have a lot of resources for doing TED Talks. Like I said, I'm working on a second one, and I know a lot of people that you can talk to about getting it done and editing and stuff like that. So
thank you.
Cool. Now I'm going to stay on you about that one. All right. So I'll get everybody in the Facebook group. You'll see an invite tonight or tomorrow morning. And then, for some reason, I don't know why Zoom said 9 o'clock, but it is always every Monday at 8, and watch for stuff in the group. And then let me know if you have any questions or anything.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It's great
All right,
meeting you.
awesome.
Thank you.
Have a good
Bye.